Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. In recent months, we've talked a lot about making sure to park your cash in a place where you're getting a decent interest rate. And that's because for the first time in many years, the government and financial institutions are offering decent or alluring returns on cash. And that's thanks to, well, maybe we shouldn't say thanks to, but in response to the high inflation we've been experiencing and the Fed increasing interest rates to combat this inflation and bring it back down to that target 2%. And it's working. The rate at which we're experiencing inflation is dropping. The rate of inflation is falling. We went from a high of over 9% last June to 4.99%, or just a hair under 5% as of March 31st of this year. Now that's definitely still higher than that target 2%, but as you can see, we are working our way back down. And as it comes down and gets closer to 2%, we can expect the Fed to stop raising interest rates. And not immediately, but eventually the Fed will start to do the opposite, and that is to cut interest rates. And following suit, you will then see the interest rates available on CDs and T-bills and high-yield savings accounts start to fall. The rate you will be able to get as a consumer will start to fall. So essentially, we want to keep our eye on the terminal rate, or the rate at which the benchmark federal funds rate will peak, meaning when they will quit raising interest rates. And that terminal rate is important to you as an investor because that's when you probably want to go ahead and lock in an interest rate, like going for a longer term CD or longer term T-bills, because until that point is reached, we're likely to see interest rates continue to climb. Many think the Fed still has room for more rate increases, but keep in mind, with inflation coming down, we're getting close to seeing these rate hikes come to an end. The next Federal Reserve meeting is set to begin on May 2nd, so we really won't have a definitive answer as to what will happen until then. And experts suggest that rate cuts could begin as soon as September of this year, 2023. Playing with rates is kind of a delicate balance because if rates are raised too high or too fast, it could push the country into an official recession. Then the Fed would have to start to decrease rates in an attempt to pull the country out of a recession. Raising interest rates has a way of putting the brakes on the economy and cooling inflation, encouraging consumers to save rather than spend because of those higher interest rates. Decreasing rates has the opposite effect, and taking advantage of these higher interest rates being offered on cash-like accounts is just a smart money move rather than leaving your cash on hand stashed in a traditional savings account earning next to nothing. For instance, those big banks haven't really budged on their traditional savings rates, meaning for every $10,000 you have sitting in these accounts, you're earning maybe $1, and you can certainly do better than that. Moving your money to where you're earning 4 or maybe 5%, which is a really easy rate to find these days. If you have $10,000 sitting in these accounts, that means you could earn around $500. It just seems like a no-brainer. Last year, I-bonds made headlines when they were paying 9.62% interest. Then in November, the rate was reset to just under 7%. And this was probably the best guaranteed rate of return you could find practically anywhere. I-bonds are very long-term investments though. They have a maturity date of 30 years, and their goal is to keep pace with inflation, to keep your purchasing power. And they're doing what they're intended to do, but keep in mind that that interest rate gets reset every 6 months. And their next interest rate is set to be declared on May 1st, and it will likely be lower because our rate of inflation is falling, meaning that these products aren't likely to be a top competitor when it comes to your investing dollars. And if you have I-bonds, perhaps you're interested in moving some of this money elsewhere to capture a better interest rate. Quick point to keep in mind about I-bonds: while it does take 30 years for them to reach full maturity, you can sell them before those 30 years are up. You can cash your I-bonds out after just 12 months if you wish, but keep in mind, if you cash them prior to 5 years, you will forfeit 3 months worth of interest. If you cash them after holding them for 5 years, there's no interest penalty. I think better places for your cash right now would be T-bills or CDs. I really like these vehicles because they allow you to lock in that interest rate. High-yield savings accounts are still wonderful, so are money market funds, but ultimately they don't allow you to lock in a rate. Instead, they give you the best available rate as of today, subject to change. So when I know this is money I don't need for the next 6 months or 8 months or 12 months, I want to lock in a really good rate because, quite frankly, I don't know how long these rates are gonna last. I think they're gonna be around for the next handful of months, but I don't really know what's in store for, say, January 2024. But keep in mind, if this is money you need to get at tomorrow or next week, it's better to keep it in a readily accessible high-yield savings account regardless of interest rate. You sacrifice a little bit on your interest rate for the convenience of being able to get at this money whenever you want it. Presently, as of the time of this filming, the highest paying CDs I was able to find are near the 5% mark. Specifically, CFG Bank is offering a 5.2% 12-month CD and 5.35% for a 24-month term with Credit Human. Now, officially the product offered by Credit Human is known as a share certificate, which is essentially a CD. CDs are traditionally offered by banks, whereas share certificates are traditionally offered by credit unions. Both are insured up to $250,000 and subject to a penalty if you withdraw your funds early in the form of lost interest. If you're looking for the longest, highest paying CD, well, that goes to Barclays, who's currently offering a 5-year term CD at 4.5%, which is pretty much the highest, longest guaranteed interest rate you can find right now. It just really depends on when you think you're going to need to access your money. And I know I've talked about them before, but another great option right now is T-bills. I just think it's so convenient to have access to these short-term, fairly high-paying cash vehicles. And they're offered in maturities of 4, 8, 13, 17, 26, and 52 weeks. Now, if you're of the mind that interest rates are still going to continue to increase in the near future, why not buy T-bills that are on the shorter term end, maybe a maturity of 4 weeks or 8 weeks? Then once they hit their maturity, you can reinvest them when interest rates are hopefully higher. Then once interest rates get close to their peak, you can lock in a longer term, maybe 26 weeks or 52 weeks, so you hold on to that higher interest rate for as long as possible. At least whatever you do, you can put your money to work in the short term while you're waiting for these rates to peak. Current T-bill auctions have been right around that 5% mark, so very competitive with the CD market. But please keep in mind, no matter what the term length of the T-bill, the interest rate stated is always stated as an annual rate. A big perk of T-bills is that they're not subject to taxes at the state or the local level. They are, however, subject to federal taxes on the interest earned. But once you factor in this tax savings, it can make them more favorable than, say, CDs, which do not receive favorable tax treatment. I do have a full video on everything you could possibly want to know about T-bills, and I will link that down below if you're interested in checking it out. And if you're looking for the best available option with a little bit longer term, maybe a mid-term length, you're probably not going to hit that 5% threshold, at least not in today's current rate environment. And I think that speaks to the notion that people are expecting the Fed to start to lower interest rates in the near term, with near term being anywhere from, say, 6 to 12 months. But if you're looking to lock up your cash for more than a year's time, and say more like 3 years, you can still get CDs paying as high as 4.85% and others paying well within that 4% range, which might be appealing based on your situation and your needs. And you could always keep in mind that 5-year term length that was offered by Barclays. The great thing about CDs is your money isn't really locked up. You can generally access your funds early, but you do face a penalty, typically in the form of a month or a few months of lost interest. So you can still get at this money if you truly need it. Just make sure if you buy any CD, make sure to read the fine print because they're all going to have their own unique features. The US government does offer what are called notes, which have longer maturities than T-bills, which are usually a year or less, but a shorter term maturity than bonds, which are typically about 30 years. They're offered in 2 to 10-year term lengths. These notes are currently paying interest rates in the mid 3% range, which is okay, but being that CDs with a similar term length are paying a full 1% higher, I'd probably just go with a CD if I was looking for something with this type of term length. I think interest rates will peak summer to late summer-ish, but I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know. But with inflation coming down right now around 5%, it's getting closer to being under control. And when the Fed feels like we've reached that point, they will stop raising rates. So I think now is a good time to keep an eye on interest rates so you can gear up to lock in a good rate when you feel like they've peaked. And right now, being that inflation has come down to about 5% and you can get 5% on your cash someplace, at least you're keeping pace with inflation. At least you're keeping the purchasing power of your dollars. And I do want to make it clear, I do not consider these cash-like accounts to be a substitute for investments. I think they're a great place for things like your emergency fund or for your short-term savings or for any money that you're going to need in the next 1 to 2, maybe 3 years. But for that long term, you're going to want to keep your money invested. That money that's for long-term goals, maybe 10 years, maybe retirement, keep that invested so the goal is to capture a greater rate of return. But ultimately, we all have cash on hand. So why not make sure we're capturing the very best rate possible on our cash accounts as well? And depending on your circumstances, the cash you keep on hand might be significant. Maybe it's just a couple months' expenses in the form of an emergency fund. Or maybe you've saved up the down payment for a house, but you're not ready to pull the trigger yet. Or maybe you're a retiree who has access to maybe 2 years worth of cash. Depending on your circumstance, it might be a substantial amount. But no matter what your circumstance, make sure you're capturing the best rate you can on your cash. Along this line of thinking, I often see people ask, okay, how often are you jumping from institution to institution to capture the next best rate? And honestly, I'm okay if I don't have the very best rate offered out there. For example, if I'm earning 5% on my cash and I know there's an institution who's offering 5.2%, I'm okay. As long as I feel like I'm competitive, I'm good. If I'm in the ballpark of what the market rates are, I'm a happy camper. And I've said this a number of times. Personally, with my cash, I've been buying T-bills using a T-bill ladder. I buy them directly through the government's website, treasurydirect.gov. So as interest rates have continued to increase, the next T-bills I buy tend to be at higher interest rates. I've been really happy to capture about 5% on my cash. Where have you been keeping your cash these days? And when do you think interest rates are going to peak? Let me know in the comments down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. Or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.